On Wednesday, the government may shut down. What does that mean to you? Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. And as a reminder, we are on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows. I finally figured out the advantage of watching on YouTube instead of just listening to this as a podcast. No, it's not great graphics. It's the possibility, perhaps even the likelihood, that one of my children will come into the picture and do something goofy and likely embarrassing to me. But hopefully not this episode because I'm recording it after they should all be in bed. But parents, you know how this works. And as a reminder, I do encourage parents and teens to listen to this podcast together. Put it on the speaker, share the AirPods, and then at these pause point questions, I would encourage you to do just that. Pause the podcast and talk about it. Use this podcast as a way to engage in discussions together. Today, we're going to be talking about the impending government shutdown. This is from the Wall Street Journal. President Donald Trump and congressional leaders are headed back into dramatic last-minute talks, just as Republicans and Democrats are bracing for a government shutdown by midweek. That could also involve a fresh round of firings of federal workers. My. A White House meeting is scheduled for Monday ahead of an expected redo of a Senate vote that will determine whether Congress will keep the government funded beyond Tuesday. Republicans narrowly passed a bill this month that would fund the government into late November and add millions for security for lawmakers and other officials. The Democrats blocked that measure in the Senate and are seeking bipartisan negotiations on health care funding. The government will partially shut down Wednesday at 12:01 a.m. if Congress can't pass a short-term spending patch. Now, we'll just review some constitutional history here, some civics information. The Constitution lays out a separation of powers, so Congress authorizes the spending, and the executive branch executes. It spends the money. So if Congress hasn't passed a budget, or what's not really a budget here, but a continuing resolution, a continuing authorization for spending, then the executive branch isn't able to fully function. And the services that we know or talk about, that's all under the executive branch. And this is also from the Wall Street Journal. A shutdown would force the furlough of hundreds of thousands of federal workers and restrict a range of government operations. Workers wouldn't be paid until government funding is restored. So that furlough, you could think of it as an involuntary vacation for government workers. It happens in private businesses too, especially when there's financial trouble. You thought you were going to work Monday, and your employer says, actually, no, we need you to take the next 2 weeks off. Usually in the private sector, it's done to save money. Here with the federal government, it's done because the funding bill hasn't passed. All right, let's have a pause point. What, if anything, have you heard about a government shutdown? This is a good chance just to check in. And if you haven't heard anything, that is okay. Don't panic. Don't feel like you've been missing out. That is completely understandable for a teenager to not have heard about it. But if you have, I think it's interesting to talk about it and just share what you've heard. As always on this podcast, we are going to start with arguments for the side that I disagree with. There's a couple arguments here. And the reason we do this is because if you want to debate like Charlie Kirk did, if you want to ask questions like Allie Beth Stuckey, you have to understand not just your own position, you have to understand what people who disagree with you think. And you have to realize that their arguments may be wrong, But as an argument, it can be a very strong argument. If you just think everyone who disagrees with you is stupid or dumb or ignorant, then there's going to come a time when someone is going to challenge you, and they're not going to be stupid or dumb or ignorant. In fact, they're going to have a very good argument for their position. Again, that doesn't mean they're right, but if you've gone in there with an arrogant mindset, you're going to be embarrassed. So let's work through these issues. Let's talk about both sides of the issues. All right, argument number one. A government shutdown is reason to panic. Panic, everyone. Well, the reasons are obvious. We need a military. The military is deployed all around the world. If the government shuts down and we don't have a military, that's a danger to the United States. That's a danger to our allies. President Trump has talked so much about shutting down illegal immigration. Well, you'll just have illegal immigrants rush the border, and there won't be anyone there to stop them. Millions, tens of millions of Americans depend on Social Security checks. Tens of millions of Americans depend on Medicare or Medicaid to pay for their medical bills or help pay for their medical bills. If those people don't have that funding, that's a crisis. That's a financial crisis for them. If you are traveling, if you are going by air, there's the TSA. If you are trying to enter or leave the country, you need customs for that. We've talked about the need for immigration enforcement, the post office. You may not like the government very much. There are certainly things I do not like about what the government is doing, but the government does have essential functions, and it's bad when the government shuts down. All right, let's have a pause point here. Do you think the government has ever been shut down before? I'm actually not going to answer that question quite yet, but I do hope you give an answer. And don't worry about, I don't know the answer. Just give it a guess. See what you think. All right, argument number two. Republicans are to blame for this shutdown. Well, and the reason is obvious. They control Congress and the White House. Republicans have a narrow majority in the House of Representatives, and they have a 53 to 47 majority in the Senate. President Donald Trump, obviously Republican. He is in the White House. If the government isn't funded, then it's Republicans' fault. This is Democrat House Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and he said, our view going into the meeting, that's the meeting on Monday, is that we want to find bipartisan common ground, to find a spending agreement that avoids a government shutdown and actually meets the needs of the American people. You see, the Democrats don't want the government to shut down. And so if it does, obviously the Republicans did something wrong. Blame them. You know, this happens in politics a lot, but it's kind of like my children, I'll come in and, you know, the cereal will be spilled all over the floor. What happened, guys? It wasn't me. It wasn't me. And a very depressing thing as you follow politics as you grow older is you see that repeated by adults. It's not me. Look at the other guy. All right, before we get into the other side of these issues, let me tell you about Mama Bear Prayers, a podcast for moms who are knee-deep in dishes and training their teens. Whether you are in the carpool lane or the coffee line, host Charity Rios wants to come alongside you and help you grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. As every parent knows, this time of the school year is hard because there is a lot going on. You take the busyness of life, and it can leave you feeling overwhelmed and even isolated. As the mom of 4 busy boys, Charity knows this firsthand, and it's why she created Mama Bear Prayers, to support moms who are on the journey of raising children. God works through prayer, so check out Mama Bear Prayers today. All right, so I don't agree personally with those two arguments. If you do, that's okay. Remember, it's okay to disagree. It's okay to debate and discuss. But if we were going to look at those arguments, let's have a pause point. Which of the great 8 questions do you think applies here? Now, as a reminder, the Great 8 questions are 8 questions that we have put in our mental toolbox to help us when we encounter an issue that we may not be completely familiar with. These are questions that we can use to find out what the truth is. And as a reminder, here are the Great 8 questions. Question 1, what happens next? Question 2, has this been tried before? Question 3, is there a principle involved? Question 4, what are the trade-offs? Question 5, what do you mean by that? Question 6, is this an appeal to emotion or logic? Question 7, am I focused on the speaker or the argument? And question 8, what does the Bible say? Now, I'm just going to start with this up front. The Bible does not speak to a government shutdown. The thing I like about question 8 and what does the Bible say is that if the Bible speaks to something, we can use that as the Cliff Notes version of what the right answer is. But right now we're in a political issue. I often on this show like to dig into the principle about what should happen, but when you go into politics, you take your principles and you have to meld them with what is possible. It's not enough just to have the right principles. You have to be able to put those principles into practice, and oftentimes when working with people who disagree with you. So this is very much a political issue. All right, let's talk about this idea of panic. Oh, you should panic. The government is shutting down. Run for the hills, the sky is falling. Well, the question that first comes to my mind is question 2, has this been tried before? And the reason that I'd start with this question is it can sound scary that the government is shutting down. The government does have some things that it needs to do. First and foremost among them is the military, protecting the country militarily. But if we know that the government has shut down before and the world didn't end, then we can feel more confident about whatever happens by Wednesday. This is from thoughtco.com, and it lists government shutdowns in U.S. history. We had one in 2018 and 2019, and that one actually lasted for 34 days. We had 2 other ones in 2018. We had one in 2013. That one lasted 16 days. We had a few in the 1990s, and we had, what is this? 9, it looks like, in the 1980s, and we even had some in the 1970s. So the government has shut down dozens of times. And look around. You and I are still here. The country is still here. And so what I'm going to suggest is that means that you do not have to panic. It may sound scary, and some people may want it to sound scary, but the government has shut down before, and while it caused disruption, it was not an existential crisis. I think we can also look at question 1 here, and that's what happens next, to understand how the government or how the country could survive so many government shutdowns. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Critical services would continue. That's would continue if the government shuts down. And Americans would continue to get Social Security payments and mail deliveries. In a move to raise the stakes for Democrats, the White House on Wednesday evening instructed agencies to draw up a list of federal workers to fire if there is a shutdown. So, critical services will continue, including the military, including the TSA. People will still travel. This is from govfacts.org, and it talks about the 2 types of government spending. I think this is something that a lot of people don't realize if you're not into the weeds of it, because in your personal life, students, you may not have a checking account yet. You may just have money that goes into your wallet or to your, I'm sure you don't have a piggy bank, but that type of idea. And you have money that comes in, and from that money is what you spend. And even as you're an adult, you will have a checking account, and the money will come in, and that will be what you spend. And maybe you'll have a savings account, but you are the one who controls that. It's a little different with the federal government. Again, this is from governmentfacts.org. The federal government runs on two completely different types of spending. Discretionary spending requires annual approval from Congress. This covers everything from national parks to food inspectors to the FBI. When Congress can't agree on funding these programs, they shut down. So that's what's potentially going to shut down on Wednesday. But mandatory spending works differently. These programs are authorized by permanent laws that continue until Congress changes them. Social Security is mandatory spending. The Social Security Act itself provides permanent legal authority to pay benefits. This distinction protects Social Security from the annual budget battles that trigger shutdowns. Okay, did you catch that? They're all of the main things that you would think of. Oh, this is what the government does, from the military to Social Security. Not all of them, but many of them aren't being affected by what's happening in Congress. Congress has already permanently authorized this spending, and while changes can happen, it doesn't have to be renewed every year. Continuing from the article, while roughly 1/4 of federal spending is discretionary and at risk during shutdowns, Social Security benefits are legally required to continue. Now, I just want to point that out, that 3/4 of federal spending is considered non-discretionary and just continues on autopilot. Now, here's something I would encourage myself, is that if you're spending 3/4 of your spending is just on autopilot and you can't change it, that is not a great budgeting habit. Now, certainly there are payments that you just have to pay, your mortgage, maybe your car payment, student loan repayments, and those just come out every month. But it's just a good budget practice to review your spending. And here we find out that 3/4 of federal spending just continues. It just keeps going on and on and on. And only 1/4 is being looked at every year. And I think this gives a sense, a taste, an example, one reason why the federal government has so many spending problems. All right, second argument here. This is the blame Republicans argument. And you're certainly going to see a lot of this in the next couple of days if there is not a spending agreement. And this argument sounds simple enough. Republicans have majorities. Trump's the president. They should be able to just get together and pass something. But it's not quite that simple. In the Senate, the Senate has a tradition of, this is from Senate.gov, of unlimited debate, and that's allowed for the use of the filibuster, a loosely defined term for action designed to prolong debate and delay or prevent a vote on a bill, resolution, amendment, or other debatable question. Prior to 1917, the Senate rules did not provide for a way to end debate and force a vote on a measure. That year, the Senate adopted a rule to allow a 2/3 majority to end a filibuster, a procedure known as cloture. In 1975, the Senate reduced the number of votes required for cloture from 2/3 of senators voting to 3/5 of all senators duly chosen and sworn, or 60 of the 100-member Senate. So the takeaway there is that for Republicans to pass this, they have to break the filibuster, and that's tactics the Democrats can use to prevent the vote from ever happening. And to break that filibuster, so to actually get to the vote, Republicans have to have 60 votes. But they only have 53. And so every Republican can vote for the budget or the continuing resolution in this case, vote for the spending bill, and Democrats can still block it even though they're in the minority. Now, certainly there's another larger debate here about the filibuster and the pros and the cons of the filibuster. But the takeaway for right now is that if every Republican in the House and the Senate votes to continue running the government, Democrats can still block it and can still block it in the Senate. And that's what we're seeing, is that Democrats are not providing enough votes to break the filibuster, and that's why the the spending bill is not passing. All right, so here's my opinion, my belief on this. There is no need to panic. You do not need to panic. The government has shut down before. Remember that question about asking how many times the government has shut down before? The reason I ask that is because if someone's trying to tell you, "Oh, this is scary, this is terrifying," and make it sound like, "Oh, it's never been done," and then you find out, "Oh, it's actually happened, more than a dozen times," the thing seems a lot more scary. Now, this is basically all about politics, and I'm just going to step back or step into the political mess. Democrats will blame Republicans for the reasons that we laid out. Republicans, I think rightly, will point out that they voted to keep the government running, and it's Democrats who voted to keep the government closed. My personal belief is that the public opinion will blame the Democrats because they're the ones who voted to keep the government closed. That doesn't always happen in politics. Politics is an odd thing sometimes, but I think in this case it's clear enough, and I do think the Democrats will take the blame. Now, they're smart. They understand this. So why are they continuing on to push the government to close? This is from the Wall Street Journal, a column from Kimberly Strassel, great columnist. All the onus rests on Mr. Schumer. He's the Democrat Senate Majority Leader, since it will take Senate Democrat votes to keep the government running. Don't be fooled. He knows well what a horrible idea this shutdown is. Now, she's talking there about politically horrible. It's a and policy too. In March, Schumer argued that to close the government would be a gift to the White House, since it would give Mr. Trump carte blanche to destroy vital government services at a significantly faster rate. That was a quote from Schumer. And Mr. Russ Voigt, who runs the Office of Management and Budget, the, quote, keys to the city, state, and country, end quote. The only thing that's changed is Mr. Schumer's personal political situation. His smart decision in March to provide funding votes was met with howls from the left, complete with demands that he step down as leader and threats of a primary. His defiance this time raises the expectations of Democrat voters to a level that all but locks the party into a shutdown that can't end well. All of this would be amusing were it not for, scratch that, it is amusing. Again, this is Kimberly Strassel right in the Wall Street Journal. The reason governments don't usually do shutdowns is because the reason Democrats don't usually do shutdowns is because Democrats do government. It's that simple, yet here we are. All right, so what we have here is we've got Chuck Schumer in a political pickle because he knows that if the shutdown goes forward, the country is going to blame him and blame Democrats. But the Democrats, the base of the Democrat Party is so angry at Trump and at Republicans that they are demanding action. Action, I tell you, we must have action. Never mind that action makes the Democrat Party less popular. Now, what's even better here, from my perspective, is that a shutdown may give the Trump administration a chance to reduce the federal workforce. Now, usually what happens in a shutdown is those employees deemed non-essential go on those furloughs, and then they're brought back, usually with back pay. But in this case, the Trump team may be able to, if the government shuts down, simply furlough and then fire vast swaths of the federal government, including the Department of Education, which Donald Trump, to his credit, is trying to shut down. And Kimberly Strassel writes here, this administration also has every incentive and decent means to lessen shutdown pain for average Americans while maximizing it for Democrats. The Trump team has already listed the programs that will continue regardless of the shutdown: Social Security, Medicare, military operations, veteran benefits, border security, air traffic control. The recent reconciliation bill ensures they function. And so this could end up being both a political and policy win for the Trump administration. But regardless of what happens, even if they come to a deal on Monday morning, by the time or after you listen to this podcast, you should not panic about a government shutdown. All right, final pause point. It's time for predictions. Make a bold prediction. Will there be a government shutdown? And if so, how long will it last? I've gone back and forth on this. I do think there will be a government shutdown, and I'm going to put it at 10 days. So make a guess. See if you did better than I did on this question. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and Christian community. Be courageous like Charlie, stay sharp, and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.